Hi, so what we're going to look at in this session is how you can deploy your PowerServer cloud installable applications to Amazon Web Services. And First, we're going to have a legal disclaimer. Let's go over the agenda. First, I'm going to talk about myself a little bit in case you don't know who I am. Then we're going to look at the steps involved in deploying your application. Now, what I'm going to use is Elastic Beanstalk. And so the first step we're going to have there is creating an Elastic Beanstalk application. There are other approaches. In previous sessions I've done on deploying to Amazon Web Services, I've used light sail instances. And then AWS also has something called App Runner, AWS App Runner. I haven't really looked at that, but it looks like it would be suitable as well. So there are, and there may be others I'm unaware of. So the point being that there are a variety of approaches, and we're going to look at just one here, Elastic Beanstalk. So after you create your Elastic Beanstalk application, you're going to add a database to it. Then you're going to take your existing database and migrate it to AWS. You're going to go back into your PowerServer project. Now that you know the URL that your application is going to be at and the location your database is going to be at for connecting to it in production in AWS, you're going to go back into the PowerServer project and update your PowerServer project to reference those URLs. You'll create deployment files, and then you'll deploy those files to AWS. And then we'll have a little demo and a Q&A. So first, my name is Bruce Armstrong. I work for a company called Integrated Data Services. I've been there 17 years now. I'm fluent in Power Builder. I've been using Power Builder since version 1. I know a few other languages there that I tend to use on a day-to-day basis. And I'm involved in a couple of open source projects regarding Power Builder that I've listed there. A little bit about the company I work for. If you want to know more about us, you can check out our website. Anyway, so our first step is to go ahead and go into Amazon Web Services and create an Elastic Beanstalk application. So main thing you'll be looking for here, down here at the bottom, there's a couple options you can use. There's .NET on Windows Server, and there's also .NET Core on Linux. I've chosen to use .NET on Windows Server just as I'm more familiar with working on, more comfortable working on a Windows platform than I am on Linux. I can do Linux. That's what we use in production at the company I'm at, but I prefer to work on Windows. And so that's what I use for this demo. So once you've created the application, you're going to go in and hit this configuration tab. And we scroll down in your configuration all the way to the very end, and there's an option here called database. You'll hit edit, because now we want to create a database. What I've decided to use, now what I did prior to this was in my own application, I went ahead and converted it to be able to use SQL Server Express. And so I've got a database that I'm going to be migrating that's in SQL Server Express. And now in Amazon Web Services, I'm going to choose SQL Server Express as the target database as well. And then you have to determine what size. I've got this thing drilled down pretty small, just so because it's just a demo and I don't want to pay the cost for running a huge database. So after it gets done running, this is what it shows now for database rather than the edit button. It shows you an endpoint. Go ahead and click on that endpoint. That's going to take us to the database page. And there you will click on the link for the database that you just created. And there's a bunch of settings down here, a bunch of tabs here. What we're looking for is the security groups tab, or the security groups section. And what we're going to find there is there's already one defined for us. We're going to go to the inbound rules. And we're going to click on edit inbound rules. I'm going to say add rule. And what we're going to find there's already been one rule defined for us automatically that opens up port, in this case, because I'm using SQL Server, 1433, internal to AWS. What I want to do is I want to create another one that opens up 1433 to the internet. And that's what I'm done here. It will just open it up so I can access it from my environment. Now, I'm only going to use this to help with the migration. Once I'm done doing the migration, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and delete that rule so that it leaves your database exposed to AWS, but not outside of AWS, not open on the internet. Now I'm going to go back into my database and I'm going to do a backup. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into another service in Amazon called S3. It's the storage area. And I'm going to create a bucket. And a bucket's just a place where you store a bunch of files. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to give it a name. In this case, I'm going to indicate that it's for the backup file. And by default, the bucket will be created with block all public access. You're going to want to leave that checked. I mean, you don't have to, but there's no reason to expose this to the public. Now what you're going to do is hit the upload option and then upload the database export file you created. Now if you're going to be using what I've shown here is just a SQL Server. You may be deciding to use a different database and you may be targeting a different database in Amazon. You may have to look to see how the migration process is different for the different databases. Like I said, this just an example using SQL Server. Once you've done doing that, we are going to go into the option groups in the database, and we need to create a new option group. Okay, so create group up there. We're going to give it a name, and you're going to pick off the database that you're using and the most recent version. Okay. You click down here at the bottom. It says Add Options. And what we want to do is we want to select, in this case, the option name is SQL Server Backup Restore. And you most likely want to make sure for scheduling, you say immediate, because otherwise you're going to be sitting around waiting for the maintenance window to open up before you can actually import the database. Okay, so now we go back into our database, and up at the top here there's an option that says Modify. And if you scroll, once you get into the configuration page, scroll down to the very bottom. There's this additional configuration section, and there's a couple of a parameter group and an option group. You're going to click on the option group. It's going to pretty much read the same thing as this does, default SQL Server X15 or whatever it is for your database. Click on that and select the option group we just created, which is in this case the one to restore the database. Okay. Finally, we're going to go back into SQL Server Manager on my own machine, and I'm going to connect to the database running in Amazon Web Services. That's why I opened that port, so that I could access it from outside of Amazon Web Services. Once I've done that, if you go into the system databases, what you're going to find is there's a procedure there, and this is an AWS custom procedure they've added that allows you to restore databases by pointing to files in S3. So that's why we uploaded that backup file into S3. So what you do is execute the store procedure by giving it the name of the database you want to create. You tell it where in S3 the file is located and the type of backup you want to do. And in this case, or restore in this case, I'm sorry, the type of restore, and we want to do a full restore here. So that's going to get the database operational in AWS. Now we need to go back to our PowerServer project, because most likely we had it pointed to a local database and local URL, and we need to change those options. So here I am. This is the Web API tab in the PowerServer project. I've gone into the connection caches, and I'm changing the server host to be the name of the database host in AWS. And you could actually test the connection as long as you still had that that port open to the public. We're also going to go in, since we've created the application, what we now know is the URL that we're going to be at. And so this is the URL up to that backslash point. That's the URL for my Beanstalk application. And then I've added Web API, because what I'm going to do in the deploy is I'm going to put the cloud publisher in a folder, the application itself in a folder, and the Web API in its own folder. And so we won't be hitting it directly on the application root domain. I'm going to put it in a Web API path. Okay, now we want to create our deployment files. So what I'm doing here on the client deployment tab, where you might have set directly to the server if you were doing something internally, what I want to do here is now actually do it as a zip file. And I'm going to include both the application and the Cloud App Launcher into the zip file. I'm going to open up the C# project, and I'm going to make one change. This is a bug in PowerServer. If you specify a path here, and when it generates a C# project, it says what it generates is application URL, and it generates the domain, and then it puts in the slash and the path name, and that's actually not valid syntax for the launch settings JSON file. What we need to do is have the launch URL, the path underneath the root that we're going to be listening at, in a separate launch URL argument. And so you're going to edit this so to take the path off of the launch application URL and add it to a new launch URL parameter. Now once you've made that change, right click on the project and indicate that you want to do a publish, and then we want to do a file system publish, and I'm going to publish it to a zip file as well. So now we have we have two zip files, but then I'm going to take the this is the Pete installer, or whatever your application name is installer, and it contains two folders. And what I did is I took each of those folders, I extracted them out, and I took each of those folders and I created a separate zip file for each one. I don't know that this step is really necessary. I think Amazon Web Services might have been smart enough to unzip that single zip into each of those folders. I thought when I was originally doing this that I might have to apply some special settings to the Pete folder, and that's why I separated them out. So I know this works. I just left it the way I know it's working, but you could possibly just deploy the single zip file that you got from the PowerServer project. So I'm not going to show you all the steps to create a bucket in S3 again, but I can create another bucket, a second bucket in S3. The difference is this first bucket here that my cursor's hovering over. That's the one that was for the backup file for the database, and I said that it would be private. For this one, for the files I'm about to upload here to S3, these ones need to be public, because when the Elastic Beanstalk runs, it needs those files to be public in order for it to access them. So I'm going to create a bucket that allows for public file access. And then I'm going to go ahead and upload the zip file that has my application and the zip file that has my Cloud Publisher to this folder. And as I do that, or this bucket actually, when I do that, I want to make sure I select this Grant Public Read Access option, so that Elastic Beanstalk can see the files. For whatever reason, Elastic Beanstalk can't see into S3 unless you make it public. And as I mentioned a little while ago, it's possible. Well, I'll show you this next part here, and then we'll go into that a little bit more. So what this is a file that you're going to create. You're going to create an EB extensions, and there's a period on the front. Period EB extensions folder, and create a file in that. It's in YAML format, which is just basically text like this. You have to make sure that these are spaces on the left here, not tabs. But what this does, this maps the zip files that are in S3 to the folders I want them installed to in IIS. So I could possibly have just said, put it at the root and given it the original zip file. Like I said, at the time I thought I might have to treat Pete differently, and that's why I split them out. So this just says take that Cloud Publisher app, Cloud App Publisher zip file, and unzip it into a Cloud App Publisher folder, and then the same thing with my application file into an application folder. The name of the file isn't important here. It just needs to be in that folder and have that syntax. The next file we're going to create is an aws-windows-deployment-manifest.json file, and the name is important here. It does have to have that name. And what this file is going to do, it's going to tell Amazon Web Services or Elastic Beanstalk what to do with the zip file for the web API. In other words, it's going to install it as an ASP.NET Core web app, and where it's going to install it. So here's where I've got my path where it installs it into this web API folder. Okay, so now I've got three files. I've got I've got a folder with a file in it, the EB extensions folder, the JSON file with the deployment manifest, and then I've got the web API zip file that was generated from SnapDevelop. And I'm going to take all those, excuse me, and I'm going to zip those into this single zip file, and the name of the zip file doesn't matter. So now I have a single file there. I'm going to go back into my Elastic Beanstalk environment, the configuration page. I'm going to click on the Upload and Deploy button, and then upload that file, that combined zip file I just created. And at that point, we are done. That will churn for a little bit, and at that point, our application will be deployed. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so this is going to be a little anticlimactic because all we're going to do is, you'll see here, I've hit the Elastic Beanstalk environment, so we're in Amazon Web Services. You saw it flash there pretty quick. That was the Cloud Publisher page, launching the publisher and downloading the files, and here's the app ready to run. So I can go ahead and log in. That's actually very snappy. I'm quite impressed with how fast that runs compared to how it runs on the local machine. Much faster actually on Amazon than it does running locally. So that's kind of nice. Anyway, that's it for the demo. And so, time for question and answers.